I have a bit of a confession to make. I am slightly addicted to building servers. It is a costly venture, my friends. Please do not follow me down this rabbit hole if you value your wallet, but I really enjoy them. I think they are so cool. I cannot believe I haven't gotten into this sooner. This is going to be a separate NAS, so it's actually going to be independent of the previous server you saw us build on this channel. I'm migrating those hard disk drives to this setup here because I think it's better to have separate systems doing separate things. For redundancy's sake, we'll also take care of a few other redundancies in this one, including a RAID 1 primary storage array, and then we're also going to be throwing the 16 terabyte drives we took out of that original system into these hot swap bays here at the bottom. There's a lot to do, a lot to build, and at the end we'll make sure it all works and probably install maybe Proxmox and TrueNAS, I guess. I don't know. Probably Proxmox and TrueNAS. I want to stay away from Windows if I can, although I am tempted by storage spaces because it was super easy to set up. I know people don't like Windows for server stuff, but at the end of the day, it gets the job done. You make the argument one way or the other. I'm gonna stick with Proxmox because it is what I'm least comfortable with, and I want to learn stuff, so we're just gonna dive in head first. Are you ready? Stay with me. If you're sick of seeing that same Activate Windows watermark over and over, head on over to VIP SCD Key, where they have Windows 10 and 11 Pro OEM keys at a fraction of the price of retail. Just use a secure payment method like PayPal, enter your product key into your PC settings window, and say bye-bye to the watermark. And be sure to use our offer code SKGS for that sweet discount. Let's kick things off by taking a closer look at the Silverstone RM21-304. Not a colorful consumer grade name because, again, it's a server chassis, so it doesn't really need to be. We have quick release buttons on the top here to quickly slide off that top cover. And as you can see, plenty of room for activities in here, including up to M-ATX motherboards, which is nice. Full-size ATX power supply support, including several adapters to run things like server power supply standards, which is convenient. You get those 4 hot swap bays. You have to remember those are going to be down below, and you don't need additional cables run to each of those drives since the board is baked into the case, which is quite convenient, although you will need Molex power, 2 Molex connectors to power this board. I wish they were SATA, but it's not the end of the world. And then you have an optional 5th 3.5-inch tray above this assembly, as well as a 2.5-inch tray next to that, and even 5.25-inch slim optical drive support up to 12.7 millimeters. That ain't too shabby. There are 3 80mm 15 mil thick PWM fans in here. That's going to give active cooling to not only our hard disk drives, but also some of the components in the back. Because remember, all the space up front, except for what's down at the very bottom where the hot swap bays are, is going to be pretty much empty. So I don't think airflow is going to be much of an issue at all here. Just remember, this is only a 2U chassis, so CPU cooler clearance is going to be a bit of a struggle if you plan on going for something like a tower cooler. It's the gaming PC mindset. You'd preferably want to use some kind of server cooler for a rig like this. Ideally one that lets you kind of streamline air from front to back, at least when oriented this way. I don't have one of those. We're going to be using a much newer AM5 CPU anyway than what you'd find in most NASs, but again, I don't think cooling is going to be an issue, and we're going to underclock the crap out of our AM5 CPU to make sure that thermals aren't really an issue. The only thing we may have to mind is this single SAS to 4 SATA cable here that I actually had to buy myself because, well, we only have a single SAS out from the logic board that runs the 4 hot swap bays. So I think, I haven't done the math, but I think we'll be okay. We might be slightly reduced in terms of transfer speed, but yeah, this was really the only solution we could go for unless we wanted like a server motherboard or something, which I don't have on hand. And as for the remaining hardware, this one might be a bit confusing. Why I didn't cheap out on the platform because, well, to run a NAS, you don't need high-end hardware. You could go with an older generation Intel Celeron or Core i3 setup, but I wanted to stick with the latest revision of AMD's Ryzen lineup because we already have a Ryzen 9 7950X 3D, I think, in the compute server, along with that RTX 4094 remote gaming down the line. So I've got a Ryzen 5 7600 to throw into our network server, our network attached storage server. So the B650M from ASRock is going to be handling that. We've got the 4 drives, we have 4 SATA ports, which is going to be totally fine here. We might have to tinker a bit in software to make them all work and be detected. That always tends to be a struggle with these cheaper boards. And then we have 2 terabyte MP600 Pro XTs with their coolers ripped off that will be running in RAID 1 for a redundancy there in the operating system. This is just going to ensure that if anything does happen to one of these 2 boot drives, the other will act as a backup, and at that point I can very quickly, come up with some sort of solution to you know, prevent that from happening again. I mean, servers and things are, you know, they're very delicate. You don't want them to just crash randomly, especially if you're using the server for pulling data to and from all the time, which we might be editing from these servers. So I want to make sure that we have a backup there in case one of these dies. And then we have a Purock LP. It's a 100 watt TDP, low profile CPU cooler, and not necessarily a server cooler. Ideally, we want to have a side facing fan that will help kind of ventilate things front to back. But again, we're going to be underclocking this chip. It will be sipping on power, so I'm not too worried there. And of course, rounding things out with a straight power 12 850 watt modular power supply. This is an 80 Plus Platinum unit. It's super efficient. It's much larger than we need, but I like Be Quiet stuff, and I love how efficient this stuff is, how good it looks, even though you can't see it in this server, and we're just gonna roll with it. The top panel, by the way, does have ventilation for our power supply, so we'll be running things fan side up. So let's kick things off with our platform. Now we're just gonna kind of take this as it comes. I'm not sure if we're gonna run into any issues. I actually had to order the SAS cable overnight because I didn't realize that the Silverstone case only has a SAS port on it. So might run into more situations like that here, not entirely sure. We're gonna drop the CPU in, lower the retention arm here, and we'll save this for a rainy day. And then in goes our two DDR5 DIMMs. We'll remove this metal heat slab. We only have one here. The second drive will just kind of be chilling like so. We'll get the first one in, and here's number 2. If you can't already tell, these have been slightly used in the past. All right, and just one more thing to take care of for the platform, that being the CPU cooler. I really dig this cooler. It's very low profile. Again, 100 watt TDP for a cooler with this sort of footprint is pretty sweet. We'll stick with the pre-applied thermal paste, and this part's gonna be a bit tricky because we have to actually fasten this from underneath. So we'll need to get the cooler situated about where it needs to be and then flip everything over. But it was at this point I realized we had a bit of a problem. See, this cooler technically supports AM5, but we have to bolt things in from behind, so the underside of the motherboard. Usually not a problem. However, in the case of some motherboard backplates, especially in the AM5 range, you can see I've already chipped off a bit of the edge of the backplate just trying to get this thing down. So basically not compatible. Which sucks because I was really looking forward to that denser Be Quiet fin stack. So instead we've gone with the stock Wraith Stealth cooler, and well, it's not gonna do as well. Again, I don't expect we're gonna have thermal issues since we're gonna be underclocking quite a bit. I was a bit worried about clearance top to bottom. This will be cutting it pretty close to just sitting flush with that top panel in the server case, so we'll see. I think we'll still be fine, seeing as though we're gonna have some fresh air coming in from the front thanks to those 80 mil fans. Here's how our platform looks all put together, and now let's get it inside our server chassis. Our rear IO shield is integrated, so we can just drop things in like this right here. It looks like everything is lined up correctly, and we can tighten it down with Phillips screws. We'll tackle basic wiring, including these SATA data cables, just to get them out of the way. If I can wiggle them in, there we go. And a bit of cable management wouldn't hurt to take care of some excess. Next up is our beefy power supply. Like I said, this is way overkill. We could get by with even a 300 watt unit if we really wanted. Just 3 cables is all we need to attach. And like I said, fan side up for some ventilation. Let's see. Come on now. Need to bend these cables a bit. Yeah, we're gonna have plenty of excess that we'll have to do something about. And check out how flush this is. I'm actually kind of concerned that this might not fit with the top panel on, so let's do a quick test fit. Got the cables just kind of sitting in there for now. Oh boy. It actually fits, and it slid on with ease, so there's nothing really holding it up. This power supply is just pressed right against this grill. I really thought we were gonna need some zip ties, but it looks like we have more or less tamed the cable monster here. You only have this space practically to work with excess cabling. I recommend either custom cables, although that would be kind of silly in like an actual enterprise grade server, or using like, I don't know, just a power supply with shorter cables in general. Usually some SFX power supplies will have shorter cabling. These full-size units do not, which means you're just gonna have to shove it all right here. And so now that that's taken care of, pretty much the only other thing we need to do is install our hard disk drives. Then we can power up and install our operating system, Proxmox probably, and then TrueNAS to manage our, I guess our RAID 10. I think we're gonna do RAID 10, maybe a RAID Z, but I'm leaning more towards RAID 10 just because I'm not as concerned about having maximum storage space. I really want like fast reads and writes, which is gonna be useful for when we're pulling storage over the network to a local machine. And I want redundancy, of course, as well. So RAID 10 kind of gives you that at the cost of additional storage space, but like I said, I think 28 or so gigs will be just fine. All we have to do is drop a 3.5-inch drive into each of these trays like so. Fasten each with included Phillips screws, and we can slide them in one by one. Here's the first, all the way in, and it should lock in place. This is the second, the third, and the fourth, all the way in, and then we can lock it in place. Now I've got to say, this is a pretty sweet looking server. Perks of using gaming hardware for an NAS like this. Totally overkill. Again, I want to reiterate that if you want to copy this verbatim, it's fine, be my guest, but just remember that you could be saving a lot more money for essentially the same performance. All you need is something to manage the hard drives and run Proxmox. Integrated graphics would be nice. You don't need a discrete card. We obviously didn't install a graphics card because, well, it's not gonna need anything super fancy. Down the line, maybe we'll add something like an optical drive or an extra hard disk drive, or maybe even like a, I don't know, SSD cache. But for now, it's ready to go. Let's install it into that server cabinet over there. Well, it's not a cabinet, the server rack. Just need to secure these rack rails that Silverstone was kind enough to also send for this case, like that there, and then we'll bolt them down, and then whenever we want, we can slide the server out. Although, I don't think we're going to need to. I actually had the rails at the wrong height. Now this is always the sketchy part, so we gotta just carefully bear the entire weight of this thing and slide it in, and hopefully we don't screw anything up. Why is this not going further back?
A few moments later.
Come on now, slide all, yep, okay. It's actually going in now, and then these little quick release tabs built into the case, which is nice. So it's more or less bolted in, and you can slide it out by pulling on these two little tabs here. So that's pretty cool. Now I've got a few more of these thin 1U plates just to kind of put a barrier between things. I'm gonna put one right here between the NAS and our NVR, just so that our power supply in particular has some breathing room. If this was sandwiched right on top of this, then that grill back there would be pretty much pointless. Here's the moment of truth then. I know this is a weird angle and there's a lot going on here. We're looking at this assembly here. We wanna see if this power is on. I've plugged in everything. We'll take care of Ethernet later. Just wanna make sure that it works. 3, 2, 1. Oh, you know what? That might do it. Power unit. Okay, here we go. Much better, and crazy loud out of the gate. It has quickly calmed though, and it looks like all 4 of our hard disk drives are at least being powered, which is a good start. It's gonna take a while to initialize all these disks, I imagine. And it looks like we're getting some LEDs, at least power LEDs, somewhere on that board back there. I know you can't really see it. All the fans are spinning. Yeah, so far, so good. And just like that, we've booted straight into the Proxmox virtual environment. This is via the USB-F connected to the NAS, so we need to have this installed on our 2 NVMe's, again in RAID 1, and I'm gonna show you sort of kind of how to do that here. I'm still I'm still learning, but I'll walk you through it as best I can. So to start, we definitely want the graphical interface. It's just easier for me. You might prefer the terminal. We're going to agree to the EULA. And okay, so this is the important part, especially if you want to RAID 1. You can see at the bottom there, target hard disk. This is where we're gonna be installing the operating system. You wanna click on options, I believe. This will give us a chance to combine both of these drives and essentially mirror each other. It'll flash the OS onto both of them. So here at options, we'll go to file system, the drop down here, and ZFS RAID 1. That's what we want, and you can see both of our drives now have been selected. That's super important. Make sure that you click the correct 2 drives. You have multiple SSDs attached, and then we'll click OK. I'm gonna give this a host name of Polaris. That's actually what I've decided to name our NAS. We'll click next. And all right, just review this, make sure it all looks okay. We'll click install, and here we go. And now that it's fired back up, we can go ahead and enter the IP. This is the local IP of the NAS, which was 1.1.28 with a port of 8006. You can click enter, and here we are. We are in the Proxmox virtual environment, which is great. This means that everything works as is. You can see we named it Polaris. Now, the other server here, this is called Aldebaran. This is just another star name. This is the, I'm calling it the compute cluster. This is the one with the 4090 in it, the big guy, the one right below the NAS. And this actually is gonna be managing the cluster. So I've actually gone in and created a cluster for both of these. So all I really need to do is tab into the Aldebaran Proxmox VE, and then from here I can manage both servers without issue. I could actually do the same thing from Polaris' side. But it's pretty easy to just tab in and access pretty much anything we could ever need. Now, the point of a NAS, literally in its name, is to create a storage solution that's accessible across the network. So the next thing we need to do is create a storage pool from our drives. We could do this in Proxmox, or we could do this via TrueNAS, which is the one that I've been kind of getting accustomed to. It's free, it's very easy to use, the GUI's great, so I'll show you kind of just a bit of how that works. But what we're going to do is download an image from the TrueNAS website, and then we'll load that through Proxmox. We'll create a partition on our RAID 1 array on the NAS itself, and then from there we can boot straight into TrueNAS and then configure our drives and things. So we'll set up, I think we're gonna go, again, a RAID 10. We might go a RAID 5, but I think RAID 10 is probably the best just for reads and writes and whatnot. I'm not as worried about capacity because I just throw my videos on there. This is really all the NAS is for. It's just for old video footage, and well, I rarely need it. It's just nice to have, you know, on a rainy day. But, and I'm sure this won't come as a surprise to some of you, I've already screwed something up. I just realized I couldn't get the hard drives to be detected in Proxmox, or in the BIOS for that matter, and I kept tinkering with different PCI lane configs and stuff and trying to make sure that I had this as prepared as possible for the several drives that are connected here. The problem is the SAS to SATA cable that I threw into here, because we have a single SAS port running from the board, the hot swap board for all 4 of these hard disk drives, is not the correct direction. It needs to be a reverse directional cable, and I bought a forward directional cable. So there's that. It's just really finicky because like the hot swap bays are SATA ports, right? And those 4 SATA ports run to a single SAS port. Now they're expecting you to pair, you know, a server grade motherboard with this. So you just run a single SAS cable to your motherboard and you can control all 4 from a single cable. That's great, that's efficient, I get it. I understand why they use SAS and not SATA, because you just have way too many cables to deal with and the throughput is just massively superior with SAS. But in our case, we have to run from SATA to SAS and then back to SATA again because our B650 motherboard only has SATA controllers and SATA ports. I just got the direction wrong, so I had to order another cable. The more you know. So, a few days have gone by, and well, this is the old cable. The new one is now finally in the system. I'll show you that in a second, but I want to reiterate, because I don't want you to make the same mistake I did, and apparently the same mistake that others have in the product review section for this product and for the other on Amazon. These look the same. These SAS to SATA little adapters look identical, but you have to mind the direction. If the direction's not listed in the title or somewhere obvious in the description, don't buy it. You need to know which one it is if you're talking about SATA to SAS. And yeah, I made that mistake so that hopefully you don't have to. Now this adapter is the correct one. I don't think the color matters. This one just happens to be red. The other was blue. But again, they look identical. They just have a directional bias. So this is the reverse cable, and now our drives are detected and they actually power on. And now we're no longer stuck with just amber LEDs like we were before. Now we have green LEDs, which signify that these disks are writing and reading data. That's a good sign. Speaking of, this took a bit of setting up off camera. I'll talk you through some of the software configuration now. Now for the purposes of this server, I'm gonna jump straight to a TrueNAS ISO, which you can download online. I'll try to have it linked in the description as well. This is, again, also free. You could use something like FreeNAS as well. I think TrueNAS is a derivation of FreeNAS, if I'm not mistaken. I think they're both Linux-based, but I've gone ahead and uploaded this ISO to the server, and then from there, I can start a VM by clicking this button up top and loading into that TrueNAS ISO. In this window, you can assign the number of cores you want allocated to the virtual machine, the amount of RAM, etc. Just make sure that you don't, underestimate this because you might have a bad time later. And then once you've booted into the VM, you can install TrueNAS to your storage drive and begin allocating disks toward your storage server. I've elected to set up my storage pool via Proxmox, so to TrueNAS, my 4 hard drive array is only going to appear as a single hard disk drive worth of about 40 terabytes of storage thanks to the RAID Z array. But that's perfectly fine. We can mount this in TrueNAS so that it recognizes it as an accessible drive for the server, and then after that, we can click on the Sharing tab and then scroll down to Windows Shares. By setting this up, we'll be able to map our 4 hard drive array into a network drive, something we can access from any other PC on the network with sharing enabled. And that's pretty much it. You can see here we have video storage from my main editing rig. This is not a drive that's mounted physically to my system. This is a drive that's mounted, quote unquote, over the network. So if we click, let's see, PC, you can see that it's about 37 terabytes worth or so. We got close to 40 terabytes here. And all I have to do is click on it. Again, think of it like a thumb drive or something, right? Pretend it's mounted physically, and all we have to do is just drag files into this window, and our server will begin writing those files to the hard drive array. That's really all we've had to do to get this server up and running, to get it noticed over the network, and to begin backing up files, backing up footage. That's what this will serve as, just a footage backup. Wow, I made a bit of a mess doing what I was doing last night off camera. So I've actually got the console open right now for Aldebaran, if it will focus, but that was just because I was reinstalling it a few times, messing with some clusters and things, which that didn't end up working out too well with the RAID array in Polaris. But I want to give you a quick run through of the server itself, because we're only missing two things now before it is fully populated. Firstly, we have the UPS there at the bottom, and I had a few people tell me I should move this further up. That is absolutely not going to happen. This thing weighs like 100+ pounds, and I prefer a low center of gravity. It's the heaviest thing in the rack, so it's going to stay at the bottom, and I'll deal with the cable management later. Above that, we have Aldebaran. That's our compute node. That's where we're going to be running our virtual machines for gaming and the like. That's going to be a fun experiment later on. Above that, we have Polaris. That's the NAS with the 4 hard disk drives that we built today. Above that, we have another 4 hard drive setup here. This is actually the NVR from Ubiquiti, and this will be storing all of our rolling footage from our security cameras at the new house. I need a few more drives. We only have 1 currently, and it's pretty small, but I'm hoping for 30 days of footage to be stored on those as a backup. Above that, I have a temporary PDU. This is actually the original power hub that I purchased for this rack, but we actually have Ubiquiti sending out a 2U power hub that is also going to allow us to manage a few other things on the power side from the console, so that's convenient. Above that, I actually bought this 3U drawer, and it has a little lock and key, probably not that secure, but I just, you know, put a bunch of my extra server equipment, wires and things in there, so it's just nice to have somewhere to put this stuff that's close to where it'll need to be. Okay, I'll be honest, I was just looking online for something that would fill up the extra 3 spaces, and this drawer came in super handy. Now above that, we've got our 2 Keystone patch panels. I did have a single 48 port panel, but I've bought a pair of 24s just to make things look a bit cleaner. We can surround the 48 port PoE Pro switch with these, so once we move this to the new house and we connect all of the Ethernet cables running through the house, this will look super clean. And then above that, we have our Dream Machine SE, which is sort of like our gateway, our security center and all that stuff. You want to make sure you have something like this hooked up to your home network. And then above that, we're going to have Ubiquiti's router, which should work with our ISP. So it'll be pretty much a full Ubiquiti setup with some custom servers at the bottom, and of course, our UPS. So then, thanks so much for coming along for the ride, helping me assemble this network attached storage server. It has been a blast. I have learned so much just for the feedback that you've given me. I just realized we have a loose screw here. It's just a cover, but anyway, it's driving my OCD insane. You know, you guys have given such valuable feedback in the comments of these last few server videos, and I know this isn't for everybody. I know a lot of you, gaming PC builders and gamers want to see more gaming stuff, but this is, I mean, these two things go hand in hand. There's so much overlap here, obviously in the tech space, with the type of hardware that you're using, or that you could use, I should say. But I've just enjoyed doing this. I've had a lot of fun. It's a nice, refreshing take on a computer build, or 2, or 4, or 8. And configuring it all, the software side of it that I'm super uncomfortable with, has just been super fun. And so thank you for your patience, thanks for your support, and I gotta get out of here because I gotta set up a lot more stuff on the software side that maybe I'll detail in a future video. It all depends on how you guys receive this. If you think the video is cool and you want to see more of it, let me know. If not, don't worry, the regular content is still resuming, including Fix or Flop and a few other PC builds in the pipeline. Thanks so much for watching. Check out relevant links in the video description, get subscribed, consider liking the video, and I will catch you in the next one. My name is Greg. Thanks for building with me.